Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured, why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description, in every episode description, to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say, I'm watching so-and-so show. And then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it. And that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 2, Episode 6 of Apple TV's Foundation, entitled Why the Gods Made Wine. Now, this title is based on a quote we hear late in the episode. It's a flashback from Harry's wife, Yana. She says, "The gods made wine to compensate those who can't afford revenge." Listen, as a motherfucker who respects and appreciates the concept of revenge, that's a dope-ass quote. Like, if you can't afford to get it back, let me give you some shit you can drink to help you forget about it. I think that's kind of a cold little quote right there. But I want to start by apologizing for getting the video out so late because, yet again, I felt a second viewing would really aid me in talking about this episode with you guys. And it just took me a minute to get an opportunity to do so, to get an opportunity to watch it. But it was worth it because lately I found myself really thinking about these episodes and coming up with ideas and interpretations. And then I go, fuck it, let me just watch it again and see if this makes sense or if I'm clear on what they're doing. Just making sure that I'm picking up what the show's putting down, even though the show is putting down some pretty unique shit. And every time I've done that, it's been useful, it's been rewarding, and this time was no different. So let's get into talking about this episode. This is yet another strong episode, I think, in a string of strong episodes for Foundation. One of the greatest compliments that anybody, I think, can give a show is to say that it stuck with them after they watched it. And they kept thinking about it, whether that's an aspect of the show or how much they enjoyed the episode itself. And Foundation has been leaving me with that feeling weekly at this point. And I keep being compelled to go back and watch again just to make sure, like I said, I'm picking up everything that they're putting down. So let's get into this episode. And I want to start at the end, actually. This episode's main focus was on the Shag storyline. And again, if you're new here, Shag, Salvor, Harry, and Gale. Yes, I know the prepositions generally aren't included in acronyms, but it helped me make a word. So here we are. This is the last time I'm going to explain what Shag means, by the way. So if whoever is watching episode 7 is like, what the fuck is Shag? They're just going to have to come back. I can't explain this every week. But like I said, main focus of the episode was on the Shag storyline with Tellum, and with that, we got a flashback into Harry's past that was pretty fucking informative. We see him as a kid mathematically figuring out a way to avoid being trampled in a stampede of creatures that are called moonstrikes, which, of course, that would seem like something that you can't mathematically predict, which is the path of a stampede. We also see a flash of this moment at the very beginning of the episode, the opening scene. But I'm going to talk about those things later, kind of just as we naturally progress through talking about this episode. We later see a young adult Harry working at a college, and he's being chastised by a woman named Dr. Taj over all of his psychohistory stuff. Harry's making the point that saying that an empire will fall, it's not a threat, it's just an inevitability just due to evolution. Dr. Taj argues that he's encouraging strength in numbers and talking about the ability of big groups to affect change. And why the fuck would the Empire want people to be thinking about that? It's just a fair question, I think. Like, if I'm the genetic dynasty, I don't want some motherfucker talking about empires fall, you guys, I promise. Like, that would fuck with me too. But this is where Harry meets his wife, Yana. And over the course of the next few scenes, we see how instrumental Yana was in the creation of the Prime Radiant. Instrumental to the point of this probably wouldn't have happened without Yana's help. At the same time as Harry makes a leap with the Prime Radiant, Yana learns that she's pregnant, and she tells him by giving him a pendant that is, I guess when you think about it, unsurprisingly, shaped like the vault. And here's where things get, I was gonna say here's where things get interesting. It was already interesting up to this point, but Dr. Taj tells them that if they go to Streeling University on Trantor, which is, we know that's where he ultimately ended up, they can continue their research and have professorships, but if they stay there where they're at, they're going to lose their funding. And Harry doesn't want to do this because he doesn't want to be, as he says, up against the ribs of the Empire. But Yana does want to do it for that exact same reason, because when you're close to them ribs, that's how you can slide that knife in. And I thought that was a nice callback, although I guess chronologically it's not a callback. I don't even know what you would call that. It's like a callback for us, but not for them. But I like the callback to when Harry essentially spoke that same concept of sliding the knife into the ribs when he was giving his instructions to Hober and the clerics during that scene when he sent the clerics to Trantor and he sent Hober to, well, somewhere that we just found out where in this episode. But yeah, I thought that was a nice little callback. Like, oh, he got that from his wife. So eventually Dr. Taj takes Yana at gunpoint, and this is when we learn that the locket that she gave Harry had her and the baby's heartbeats in it, though it was kind of obvious before she explicitly said that. Like, you could see Harry, like, grasp it, and, like, I pieced together, like, oh shit, that locket somehow informed him that both Yana and the baby were dead. And then later he's like, he kind of says something like this, haha, Dr. Taj, this locket informed me that both Yana and the baby were dead. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, well, I kind of put that together. But Harry doesn't need wine because he can afford revenge, and he takes Dr. Taj to the same Moonstrike stampede, and he tosses her into it while he stands there and dances among them, avoiding being trampled. And we learn a couple of things here. For starters, we learn about the child who didn't survive that I really honed in on as soon as it was suggested. We also learned about Harry's propensity for revenge, which I think is important given that the episode title is named after that concept. I don't know necessarily what we're supposed to take away from that, but it does tell us that Harry is not always just beholden to science. Like, it's all like about psychohistory and doing, like, this is a guy who, if it comes right down to it, he will throw all of that shit out of the window for revenge. And it's interesting, this is a guy who, and he lost his wife, he found a way to take revenge, but he's also right now preaching, allow this shit to happen as it pertains to Salvor's death. But lastly, we learn about the lengths that Tellum is willing to go to in order to manipulate, as she pokes and prods Harry about this memory that he's very clearly trying to repress. And I think it's a good moment to kind of segue into the most interesting aspect of the Shag storyline this week, which was Tellum's manipulation of them. Just as the show employed a unique way of having flashbacks, I think that was last week, right? Where I said that the unique way of having flashbacks, which is like, hey, want to watch our sex tape from a few decades ago? And then they could just play a flashback. I thought that was really creative. This episode, I think, found an interesting way to do the unreliable narrator thing, or at least kind of like a version of it. I don't know, I haven't given too much thought into what I would name this, but it feels like an offshoot of unreliable narrator. But we see throughout this episode that Tellum is manipulating the various members of Shag via screen distortion or blurriness for us, the audience. Whenever that happens, it seems to indicate that Tellum is in some way affecting the conversation. This creates a situation where we can't know if certain things Shag are saying, are their own thoughts and beliefs, or if they're being manipulated by Tellum. And we first see this in the opening scene. Before we even know what it means, we just see Harry staring at the water and envisioning the stampede scene that we would later see with the legs of the Moonstrikes. And little did we know at this time that was Tellum essentially already getting to work on Harry's mind. So Salvor later talks to Josiah. He's a little boy with the throat scar. I don't know why I had to do this I could have just said throat scar. I don't know why I needed the hand gesture. And we learned that the Mentalics can do something called unvoicing, where they essentially speak without speaking out loud. They do a lot of unstuff here, unthinking, unvoicing. I just want to say, as an aside, as a very fervent introvert, I wish that people thought it was rude to speak their thoughts out loud as well. I would really dig living on Ignis. Let me just say that. It's also here where we learn that Tellum's followers all follow her because she saved their lives at some point. But did she? Like, we watch her manipulate people's thoughts this entire episode. Is it not feasible that she's only making these people believe that she saved them in order to get them to follow her? I feel like that's a very, 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 very likely scenario that's going to play out probably in the next episode, which for me is tonight. I'll be watching that right at 9:00. It sucks that I watched the episode these last 2 weeks. I've watched the episode. I don't put the video out until hours before the next episode. I'm really gonna try to do better with that as far as the rest of the season goes. But I digress. But that's what I loved about this episode, though. The fact that nothing is as it seems, and we're kind of left feeling like our minds are being played with the audience, just like the characters on the screen. So I thought that was pretty cool. But Shag then makes their push to tell Tellum to help them form the second foundation on Ignis. And she says that when you have the abilities that the Mentalics do, you're either a god amongst men, which is boring, or you're a wolf amongst sheep, which gets you killed. So she'd rather just stay low-key and be left alone. And one thing I liked about this scene, constantly throughout this episode, Tellum talks about how she doesn't like Harry. She doesn't want him involved in any of this. But this scene was probably my favorite example of it because it's so fucking low-key. Like, she has multiple moments where she's basically like, yo, fuck Harry. But, like, this scene was super low-key. Harry's like, yeah, we really need your help to form the second foundation on Ignis. And she's like, oh, yes, for your psycho history. And, like, the whole time, I watched with the captions on, the whole time, psycho history has been one word. But Tellum definitely put a space in there, and psycho became an adjective to describe Harry, and not to describe, it was no longer psycho history, it was the history from a psycho. And I thought that was like, it's a brief pause, but it felt very intentional. And I don't know if everyone else picked up on it, but I sure did. Like, yes, for your psycho history. Tellum says she gleaned everything that she needs to know about their mission from Gale's mind, and she did. She lays out everything real quick, like, oh, you have the first foundation, the second foundation, and this. Like, she lays out basically in like 2 sentences everything that's happened on Foundation up to this point, except for one thing, which is the mule. Harry tells her that a more powerful Mentalic is going to come along, and he's going to fuck everything up and destroy everything, and then Gale shows her the vision from the future of the destruction and of Salvor's death. Now, last week, I said that it seemed to me that Tellum was going to use Gale's desire to save Salvor and manipulate her in order to drive a wedge between her and Harry and take it, and then use that to kind of like take advantage of Gale now that she has her isolated. I think I could get the points for that. I feel like I've successfully called that. After the vision of the future, Tellum and Gale have a scene together in which Tellum essentially implores Gale to not accept this inevitable future that Harry has laid out, and to, that you can do something about this. You don't have to sit here and listen to Harry. Who is Harry? He's a piece of shit. She later visits Gale on the ship and then really turns up the pressure by further gassing up Gale and continue to frame her in opposition to Harry. She's like, you are singular, Gale. Like, can you imagine just... like, already, like, I'm like, all right, I'm on your team. Like, if you're like, you are singular, one Mike. I'm like, oh, I'm singular? Okay, I'm gonna fuck with you now. She tells her how she manipulates some of these illusions, like the whole thing about, yeah, you smelled the barnacle in my pocket, that splash of water on you. Oh, she explains that, and she eventually provokes Gale into realizing her own powers and abilities. And then is like, I don't even know why you fuck with Harry since you way better than him. And I'm just like, wow. Tellum is really putting on the full court press here. Like, the moment the ball is inbounded, Tellum is on defense. And the cherry on top of the fuck Harry cake happens after Tellum reveals she's terrified of death and of the mule. She offers her people to Gale. She says she'll train Gale and she'll help her keep Salvor alive, just as long as Harry ain't got shit to do with it. And Gale decides to take Tellum up on her offer and present it to Harry. Or does she? This is an interesting sequence of scenes here that I want to talk about. So Salvor and Harry are fishing, and both of them seem they're fishing both literally and figuratively. They seem to be fishing for information from each other. I briefly wondered if one was being manipulated by Tellum, and I'm not going to say they weren't, but I kind of let that go since we didn't get the screen distortion. But Harry talks about using the Prime Radiant to essentially keep an eye on Vault Harry. And he says that essentially the Prime Radiant is one object at two places at the same time. So he says to look into it is to look into his hand. And I was like, oh man, that's a really cool sentence. But at the end of this conversation, Salvor's like, so where'd you got the Prime Radiant anyway? And then, which was like a strange transition and a strange question, I think, from Salvor. But before Harry can answer, she starts to catch a fish, and then Tellum and Gale immediately appear. And I just found that interesting that Salvor asked where the Prime Radiant is right as Tellum was approaching. That felt very much like Tellum was using Salvor to probe Harry for information, or fishing for information. So this is when Gale tells Harry that she wants to go along with Tellum's plan. And in this scene, we see the screen distortion on Gale every time she is framed alone in the shot. Like if Tellum's in the shot too, it's not, you don't get the distortion. Only if it's Gale by herself. So, excuse me. Harry makes the excellent point of, can you really trust someone who can control your mind? He says that Gale doesn't even know if her words are her own. And then he starts to kind of like show physical reaction. So at the beginning, when we saw the screen distortion, when he was seeing the hooves, we just saw it. And there's another moment where we just see the screen distortion. But then in this moment, Harry reacts physically, like he has a headache. And Tellum taunts Harry in this moment, bringing up the Moonstrike incident, which again, we still don't know about at this point. And she brings it up, in vivid detail, right down to like, she says like, yeah, the hoof prints on the ground, all this kind of stuff. Very, very clearly she knows what the fuck this is. And the next time we see Harry, Salvor asks him about this moment from the past, but the screen distortion at this point is heavy on Harry, along with a really bad headache, and he tells her to find the Prime Radiant, unsurprisingly. We end this sequence of the episode. I don't know what's going on in my throat right now. Pause. We end this sequence of the episode seeing Harry leave on the ship, but it's not actually Harry. It's another illusion from Tellum, and the real Harry is tied to some posts in the water, and we end the episode with Flesh and Blood Harry seemingly drowning. Listen, I thought this stuff with Shag and Tellum in this episode was really strong. Like I said earlier, that's a creative way to do the unreliable narrator, and I loved questioning whether or not Tellum was fucking with people's minds at certain moments, and if so, to what end. But to that point, I still don't know what her goal is and why. Like, yeah, on one hand, she explicitly says to Shag, and in private, at the end of the episode we meet her in, which was, I don't know, episode 3, that she doesn't want a second foundation. You remember she said something like, we're going to find the Prime Radiant. She's talking to the black guy. We're going to find the Prime Radiant and there will be no second foundation. But is there a more nefarious reason, or is it just because she wants her people left alone? Like what she said about, wolves among sheep, God amongst men, I just want to be left alone. Is it that simple? And that's why she doesn't want the second foundation? Or is there something more nefarious going on? Conversely, at the same time, doesn't she seem to be helping Gale to start the second foundation? And she wants to separate Gale from Harry. So if that's what she wants, again, to what end? Like, what does it serve her to have Harry out of the picture if they're still going to move toward Harry's goal of a second foundation? Which I don't think is, again, I don't think we've seen the extent of Tellum's plan. I think separating Gale from Harry and using the second foundation as a means to do so is probably like step 1 of the plan. Step 2 is not the second foundation. It's probably something involving Gale. I just don't know what it is yet. And I'm okay with that for now. But I do think I'd like to get a little bit more clarity on what exactly Tellum wants by the end of this next episode, episode 7. There are 3 other storylines we briefly see in this episode, and I'm only going to briefly go over them since the meat of the episode is the Shag stuff anyway. So the clerics arrive on Trantor in this episode, and I just want to say up front that I wasn't sure if it was Trantor or Westworld, but everything was really cool looking there. I mean, this show has been crushing the visuals. I don't talk about it every week, but it's kind of like, it's like constantly talking about Meryl Streep being a great actress. It's like, okay, yeah, duh. I'm not going to talk about how great Meryl Streep is in every review of Only Murders in the Building that she's in. It's like, okay, yeah, she's fucking great. I'm not gonna say every week like, oh, the visuals are great, or this great cool thing happened, or look at this amazing, like when the ships be coming into space and shit, and the visuals. I can't hit that every week, just because it's like, okay, I'm not gonna state the obvious over and over and over every week, but visuals were sick on Trantor. I like the terminal or that station or whatever that they arrived in. The view from the room that felt like it was taken from an episode of Obi-Wan. All of that was really cool shit. Too bad that's all we got out of the Cleric storyline this week. They arrive on Trantor and basically get arrested right away, and that's it. Polly tells a story, but he talks about the difference between belief and faith as it pertains to him and Brother Constant. But as an atheistic sinner, I don't give a fuck about any of that. Cute scene, though. Hober arrives in what seems to be the middle of nowhere on his mission from Harry, but is quickly met with a giant ship full of spacers who ask why he's defiled the home swarm. And again, not much happens here, but it does seem like Harry's plan for Hober may involve maybe the Imperial fleet. I don't know. We'll see. And then finally, Day unveils a massive statue for Winniset, who is Cleon the First's mother and the last true Empress. Once the genetic dynasty began, Winniset was all but forgotten, and there were, of course, no further empresses. But not today, goddammit. He liked to introduce everybody to Sereth Part 1. Kind of like Dune Part 1. Sereth Part 1, their new empress. And I like when he goes, and for those of you in the audience who may not understand it, I'm going to spell it out for you. The genetic dynasty is over. I was like, okay, thanks for holding our hands for that, Lee Pace. But then Sereth goes, and she flips the script, and she's like, she flips the script on Days. They only live because I allow it as, and says that they're there for the people and their wishes, empire's required fucking action. Goddammit, and that's that. You know, another great episode for Foundation that really got the old gears grinding in my head. I love that. As usual, I can assure you guys I'll be watching episode 7 tonight, but I'm getting a tattoo tomorrow. I have a busy day, so I can't promise that I'll get that video out tomorrow. I really don't want it to end up being next Thursday either, though. So we'll see. I'm going to work really hard. I really want to get it out tomorrow, but we'll see what happens. Especially if I want to watch it a second time, then yeah. But whatever happens, whatever, get it out. Until then, peace.